morning and welcome to the September 13th, 2021 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using as our state and community continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. This format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. Looking ahead, tonight's regular meeting will include a public forum. Information about how to participate is available on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And as always, other avenues of communication with me and City Council are available, including email and voicemail. And with that, I close by thanking you all for joining us and turn it over to the City Manager for our one and only and very important topic of conversation tonight.
Thank you so much, Mayor and Council. Joined today by our awesome team to give you a good, thorough discussion on the Community Safety Initiative and kind of set you up for future conversations about how you might want to continue to lead that work. So I think Christy is kicking it off, and I'll just ask her to jump in.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, Mayor Vinnis and councilors. It's great to be back in front of you tonight to talk about the Community Safety Initiative. The last time that we provided you a formal update was November of 2019. And at that point, you received an overview of progress made to date and heard about how the early bridge funding investment provided a strong foundation for implementation. Since that time, a lot has changed. We've experienced a global pandemic, responded to racial injustice and inequities following the murder of George Floyd, and witnessed firsthand how natural disasters and climate change are impacting us locally. These changes have shined a bright light on some of the system gaps that the CSI plan hopes to address. Next slide, please. Tonight, we're going to take a bit of a journey down memory lane. For some of you, this will be very familiar. For others, it will be new information. The point of the journey is to spend some time really remembering how we defined the problem, established the outcomes, and developed system service strategies and funded the initiative. I'm joined at the table, or the virtual table tonight, by Chief Skinner, Kevin Altucker, and Twyla Miller. Tonight, I will start with a recap of some of the work that we've done as it relates to the tax and the CSI investments. Kevin will give us an update on the community engagement process that we've been undertaking for several years and the most recent information that we've gathered this last year. The Chief will provide updates from EPD around some of those three key strategies around response. And then Twyla Miller will close us out with some financial updates and the forecast. As many of you are aware, this work started a number of years ago, built upon the community justice efforts that began in 2015. In 2018, the council led several work sessions to closely look at the status of the community safety system, which revealed some significant needs and gaps. This slide will look super familiar because we used it a lot to explain. And at its core, what the problem was is that the community safety initiative was developed to solve is the needs that our community has related to the capacity. And we were able to keep up with the growing number of gaps within the system, provide that service that people needed every single day. Next slide. Based upon the data reviewed and the input from the community, some of those critical gaps included increasing calls for service and our inability to respond in a timely manner. The backlog of cases at municipal court, I know that several of you probably remember that conversation with the timeliness of justice, the impact and increasing number of people experiencing homelessness, along with the ongoing shortage of shelter options, and the growing costs for ambulance services and reimbursements not keeping pace with that to be able to provide services. I'm not going to touch on all of the different things that came up, but those are just a few of the highlights. When the Community Safety Initiative was being developed, City Council approved a set of desired outcomes they wanted to achieve. These outcomes were based on those identified needs and gaps within the services, as well as input from the community, and other best practices, including input from 21st century policing consultants who actually were at a city council meeting to talk with you about the strategies that were put together. At a high level, they included building trust, increasing safety, and focusing on prevention and strengthening partnerships. Within each of these outcomes, you can see that there were more specified measures, including things like resolving cases more quickly, reducing response time, and enhancing staff training and increasing connections with community service members. To meet those desired outcomes, we came up with a strategy, the three-tiered approach strategy that it was always predicated upon a phased-in approach. The three key areas were the prevent, respond, and resolve. The total amount for those CSI strategies was $23.6 million. The purpose of this was really to take an approach, a very system-wide approach to addressing the problems. What we know is that the systems are so integrated in the way that they work together that all of the systems need to be strong. So you'll hear the chief often talk about you cannot simply add police officers without thinking about the impact to the courts. And you also have to have better services and places for people to get help and off-ramps out of the traditional system. So our team really focused on looking for new and creative ways to think about how we implement and move forward to address those needs. In order to fund the initiative, in June 2019, the Eugene City Council passed the Community Safety Payroll Tax Ordinance. The ordinance authorized a payroll tax to provide funds for community safety services that included police, fire and emergency medical services, municipal court and prosecution services, prevention and homeless services. These were the services included in the Community Safety Initiative. Both the city code and the city charter limit the use of the payroll tax revenue to funding these specific services. There was flexibility in how the payroll tax funds are distributed amongst these services in the different categories that I was just mentioning. The distribution is not prescribed by either code or charter. So while there is some flexibility in how we provide oversight, the mechanisms that were put in place are also very important. The payroll tax is placed in a separate account specifically for community safety services so that they can easily be tracked and monitored. Each year, an outside or external auditor will prepare a report on whether the payroll tax revenue was used to increase funding for the 4 categories included within the community services previously discussed, so those things that I had just mentioned. Separately, the establishment of a citizen advisory board to do an annual review of the use of those funds. The committee the board just finished their report, and the city manager provided that to you late this summer, which was excellent work. That team is doing a phenomenal job. A city charter amendment passed by the voters in 2019 caps the payroll tax rates, so they can't change without a specific public vote. And there will need to be a public vote to reauthorize the payroll tax. In 2027, the city council must determine whether or not to refer the payroll tax to the voters or to let it expire. So that's kind of the timeline that we're working within that was established by council. So this next series, I want to talk a little bit about some of the investments. So our first investment started in 2019. The initial investment of general funds, also called the bridge funding, focused on high priority strategies that would be put into place prior to being able to collect the tax. So we could kind of get a jump start on the work that needed to happen. The initial investment of $8.7 million covered 18 months of services from January 2019 through June 2020. Csi Bridge Funding increased services to youth with significant behavioral challenges, and they also to help them successfully participate in and complete recreation programs while supporting long-term prevention efforts. Csi funding stabilized and expanded shelter services to people experiencing homelessness, including case management services at the rest stops, keeping the service station provided by St. Vincent de Paul open additional hours, and providing more services such as showers and laundry services, and expanding the capacity of Dusk to Dawn and funding it year-round. One of the key things that you might recall on some of these strategies is that we had been funding them with one-time dollars through various years of budget cycles. And so the CSI finally helped us stabilize ongoing funding, which gave more stabilization to our providers who were providing those critical services. This round of funding also launched EPD's Street Crimes Unit, which works to proactively respond across the city to quality of life issues. They added 5 community service officers to help support better response to non-emergency calls for service, and brought on 4 staff to the 911 call center to help support emergency response. As you may recall, we had numerous conversations about the low staffing levels at the 911 call center, and it was much needed and critical support to help really move us forward. Increasing our police response requires additional support without our municipal court system to adequately address and resolve these cases, and CSI funding supported that effort by funding critically needed staff in the court and in the prosecutor's office. It also provided stable funding to continue successful alternatives to the court system to help them better connect with people. So examples of that would be our community court that you're very familiar with, and the mental health court. And the goal with the CSI funding as it's fully phased in is to be able to have a robust, to really build out that mental health court system and the community court to expand to different areas of our community. These initial investments were put in place with the understanding that other CSI strategies would be phased in over a period of fiscal years following implementation of the payroll tax. The timing of this phase-in would be determined by the city's experience with the tax implementation and would be reviewed and approved by City Council via the city's annual budget process. In FY21, initially funded CSI strategies continued with the total projected expenditure of approximately $7.3 million. So those first initial investments were continued through fiscal year 21. And some of those first time expenses were one time. And so that's why that dollar amount changes a little bit to $7.3 million. Due to the impacts of COVID and the ongoing economic uncertainty that we experienced, the organization paused planned community safety budget increases as part of the effort to streamline operations and reduce costs. So no new strategies were implemented, and existing funding was used to maintain the programs and staffing that had already been set in place. So in essence, we delayed 1 year's worth of strategies while we were working through that economic uncertainty. Twyla will talk a little bit more about that later. The fiscal year 22 builds on the implementation of the CSI strategies and adds investments in areas including after-school prevention programs, court staffing, additional patrol officers, and community safety officer, as well as staff to support. So you'll see that there's a 4th column here called support. And that column is really for those things that don't really fit into one of the 3 columns, but support the initiative in general. So it's the addition of a full-time CSI project manager and the tax implementation staffing. So that's a bit of an overview of kind of what we've done to date and where we're at with the implementation rollout. With that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Christy, thank you very much. Hello, counselors and Mayor. Thanks for this opportunity. It's been a while before I've been in front of you, so let's give it a go here. I've got 2 slides. I'm going to talk briefly about the community engagement processes that the city implemented over the last 3+ years. So the slide you're looking at now is a timeline that shows some of the major milestone events, not only the community engagement events, which I'm going to speak to, but also some of the other important events along the way, just so you can anchor yourselves on that timeline. So for example, under 2018 and 2019, there's a box that shows the CSI revenue team was at work during that time. And it also notes in 2019 when council did approve the ordinance with the payroll tax. So I'm going to be speaking about the community engagement process, which started early in 2018 with the fire chief and the police chief and sometimes the municipal judge going out into the community and attending many different types of groups and community events to not only communicate what they were seeing and what they were experiencing with our community safety system, but also gave them an opportunity to listen to community members. And the groups were many and varied, including many neighborhood groups, League of Women Voters, for example. They went to the farmers market. They went to the Eugene Rotary Club. They went to and visited and spoke with Eugene Chamber of Commerce. They touched base with the Latinx Alliance Group, the Jewish Community Relations Council, went to the Sunday Streets events that were happening at the time, and many, many, many more events. And so that was the initial kind of engagement process. And that was an informal process. And the city also engaged in several more formal type engagement methods. And one of them was a scientifically valid survey, a telephone survey of 408 likely voters. And that happened in 2018. And the results of that survey were that generally respondents were, they felt that Eugene was a fairly safe place to live. They were very concerned about issues surrounding homelessness and homelessness response. And they were vaguely aware of the fact that the calls for service, for example, police, had been increasing for some time, but staffing levels had remained flat, which resulted in kind of increased response times. So that was kind of the general flavor of that first survey. And when I say a scientifically valid survey, what I mean is that the sample of the 408 likely voters was representative. It was a random sample, and so it was representative of the thoughts and perceptions of likely voters at the time. Now, just after that survey was completed, the city launched an online survey through the city's webpage, and we patterned that survey very, very closely with that scientific survey, but we also added 3 qualitative questions that gave people an opportunity to type in their thoughts and feelings and perceptions and experiences around issues of community safety. And that survey, although not technically scientifically valid, that is, it was people self-selected to take the survey, it did provide the city with important information. There were 22,478 respondents and lots of qualitative data. The results paralleled the scientific survey fairly closely in that issues of homelessness were at the top. That was a priority, and closely followed was concerns about police response time. Let's see. I'm going to move on now to 2020, and you're going to see a little block up there that says Ad Hoc Committee on Police Reform. I'm just going to mention that briefly because it tied into the CSI community engagement process in a couple of significant ways, which I will speak to shortly. The CSI community engagement process started in the fall of 2020. It had 3 prongs, if you will, kind of 3 methodologies. One of them was a focus group with BIPOC community members. There was another online survey that the city made available both in English and in Spanish, more than 2,400 respondents to that survey. And then finally, there was a community listening session. So there was 2 opportunities for just members of the public to weigh in on their feelings about the community safety initiative. The results of the BIPOC focus groups were concerns around homelessness and also police response. The online survey, interestingly, paralleled in many ways the responses from the online survey in 2018, in which issues of homelessness were number 1 and closely followed by concerns around police response. And so people were indicating that they were very interested in increasing police capacity in order to respond to the calls for service in a more timely manner. The themes that came out of the community listening sessions, again, homelessness issues, response to unhoused populations, was number one. There was also a very strong sentiment about increasing police response and their ability to cover those calls for service. I think, Laura, if you advance to the next slide, here's where I'll talk about, well, I just kind of mentioned that. There's a few other things on the bulleted list that I'll mention, but here I'm also going to talk about the overlap with the ad hoc process. So again, the CSI engagement session, the only thing I didn't mention previously was this strong support for youth programs and prevention programs and diversion from the criminal justice system. I want to just take a moment to highlight the overlap between the ad hoc process and the CSI engagement session. And there was one really significant overlap, and that was on the area or in the area of alternative responses. So both the ad hoc process and the CSI engagement highlighted this importance that the community felt that there should be opportunities for an alternative response, better matching the response to the particular need, that particular call for service, and including alternative responses for folks experiencing mental health crises. So with that, I am now going to turn the virtual mic over to Chief Skinner.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. It's great to be with you tonight and kind of get going again. I hope you had a great break and got a chance to get some rest and get recharged. And this is the exact topic that's going to get you going again. And so I'm happy to be here and be able to offer this to you. So Laura, if you give me that for my first slide. We're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to tell a story is what we're going to do. And I'm happy to kind of take you on this journey. We thought, and I thought it would be important to help understand kind of what it looks like from a caseload perspective on a life cycle of our calls for service. We talk about it all the time about how many calls we have holding, why we can't get to our calls, how it's so easy to get behind in those. And so what we did is we grabbed a day in July 28th, and we're just going to kind of walk you through this so you got a good understanding of what to expect on any given day when we're thinking about the types of calls that come in and how we get so far behind, quite frankly. So if you notice on the far left there at 1300 hours, which is 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we have 19 patrol officers on. And at that point of the day, we already have 24 calls for service holding, which doesn't seem like a lot until you start looking at what is happening as you kind of follow the little bouncing ball across this and see our first code 3 response to a kidnap call that happens at 13:06 or 1:06 in the afternoon that takes 10 officers dispatched to respond to this very significant call. And now you can start to see with 10 officers encumbered on a call like this, and the calls for service are continuing to come in, how easy it is for us to get behind. As you follow that over across your screen, you'll see at 16:41, that's 4:41 in the afternoon. We've got another code 3 call for service that comes in with 5 officers dispatched. And then at 17:15, if you look at the way that's bridged, that call for service that came in at 1:06 in the afternoon, our last unit finally cleared that call, which meant they could go back to answering other calls for service at 5:15 in the afternoon. That's how long it takes sometimes to resolve these multiple car responses and these calls for service. It really is a misnomer. And oftentimes we don't do ourselves any favors when the media portrays, or oftentimes Hollywood portrays, the ability to handle calls for service in 48 minutes, not counting commercials, quite frankly. And in this particular case, this is a really good example of how a very complex investigation can tie resources up for an extended period of time. That code 3 call for assist fire comes in at 16:41. If you jump all the way to the end, you see our last unit clears from that call at 9 o'clock at night after assisting fire. And in between those two things, a third code 3 call for service for an assault, which takes another 5 officers. And across the bottom, you can see where we started out with 24 calls for service holding at 1 o'clock, how quickly that becomes at 9 o'clock. We're already at 51 calls for service holding. And so that is a great example of our workload and how that happens almost every single day, where we get behind and we're not able to catch up because of the lack of resources. And it's exacerbated by the fact that we have multiple code 3 calls for service that come in that need multiple car response. Part of our very important work we do is to make sure we do it safely, not only safely for the community, but safely for our officers too. And that's why we send multiple cars to many of these calls. Next slide, please. Let's dig into some data. And I will tell you, before I dig into this, let me just talk a little bit about the amazing work that our analytics team has done. The last time we talked about data, and I wasn't here with you when you talked about data really in this depth, and that was, I believe, February of 2018. I was preparing for this process and actually watched that council meeting where Director James sat down with you for the first time and on a bar graph tried to deliver some numbers to you to help understand how the demand was outpacing our supply to meet that demand. And so since then, we've learned a lot about how we analyze data. We've got some really bright individuals in there that are doing a fantastic job. So I think what we've done here is we're starting to really fine tune our data analysis so that we can deliver the very best information that we can. And so numbers may not be exactly the same from 2018, but I'm really confident in the numbers that we see now. And we've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks going over this. Real quickly, this graph and the next one I'm going to show you are basically the same numbers, but they're just presented a little bit differently. We put this graph in here because it feels very much like many of the financial graphs that we see, where we see a lineup that's an expenditure line and a revenue line. And oftentimes we're able to look at that really easy and see what's happening. If you look at the top line here, the black line, that's our total calls for service each day. And it's somewhere in the neighborhood of over 450-ish calls for service a day. And if you see the orange line below it, that's our average number of calls for service that we arrive to on a daily basis. So you can see that the demand and the need to be able to respond to calls certainly outpaces the number of calls we actually respond to. And the red line is just to show you that delta between those two. And the average number of calls for service daily that go unresponded to is 166. And that's a big number. And what I would like to point out to you is that number is all calls for service. So that would include any calls for patrol, any calls for our CSOs they can't get to, and any calls that our cahoots workers are not able to get to on a daily basis either. So that's a total number of calls for service of the entire system that we need to start chipping away at and getting that number smaller in a variety of different strategies, get that number smaller so that we can start meeting the needs of this community. Next slide, Laura. Here's a great graph for you to see this. And I'm going to tell the same story here. Top line is the total calls for service. The black line is the calls for service that are dispatched. The blue shaded area is the calls for service that patrol handles. So that room in between your black line and your blue shaded area is the other resources that we have or that are responding to calls. That could be cahoots, that could be a CSO, that could be a counter complaint handled by our record staff. It means the call was handled some way other than patrol, but you can see how much work they do even right now in our system and how much work our patrol officers do. The red is really where we need to talk about, and that's really where we have a concern. This is over a day period. This is on average our day period. And you can see at 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, we have a few calls holding, but then as the day goes on, per half hour and per hour, it just starts to compound on top of each other where it gets really, really dark red when you're looking at the 5 o'clock hour and into the evening times. All of those emails that we get, I get them too, all those emails of people so frustrated that they're not getting the service that they believe they deserve, and they do deserve it, are all there in the red. we could put all those emails in almost every single one of those, put those in the red shaded area because we weren't able to respond to those calls. And so that's the area that we're trying to bring that up closer to the X axis there on the 0. We want that up there. And that's where we need to start making some significant changes, not only in our supply to be able to respond to these, but this is where I think we can do some really interesting creative work on matching the response with the need. There's a lot of needs in that red. Not all of those are patrol needs. You can see here, 94 of those are patrol out of the 166. The rest of those are a combination of CSO and cahoots, and we can continue to still find creative ways to respond to those calls. This isn't always about adding a bunch of patrol officers, although I can tell you that we absolutely need to do that, but we do have some room for creativity. And I think that that speaks to what you've heard over and over and over again in our engagements, is matching the right response with the need. Next slide, please. We're going to go over the metrics real quick that we talked about in the CSI ordinance. And the first metric we're going to talk about here is proactive time. You've heard me say time and time again that if we don't start getting our officers more proactive or give them unobligated time that they can do things like community policing, they can do preventative patrols, they can do that proactive policing. And Councilor Evans, you talk about the relationship you want this police department to have with its youth and with other parts in other neighborhood groups. This is where the relationship is built, is having enough time you can actually do those things without going from call to call to call. You'll see two metrics here for CSOs and patrol. You'll see the pre-bridge funding, which outlines the number of minutes in each one of those buckets, and post-bridge funding. And you'll see right now that post-bridge funding for patrol is 7 minutes of unobligated time per hour for our officers. And that's just not enough time. A healthy balance is 20, 20, 20, 20, 20 obligated time, 20 administrative time, 20 unobligated time is what we'd love to get to. I'm not sure we'll get to that healthy balance, but certainly we can recognize that 7 is just not enough time for us to be engaging in the 21st century policing and community policing initiatives that we want to do. Next slide, please. Here's the second set of metrics with calls with no response. You'll see in Q2 of 2018, Director James sat in front of you and delivered a big number of 80. Right here, we have 79.8. I'm happy to say that the analytics was pretty close. Today in Q2, when we look at an average quarter-wide average, the average number of unable to respond to calls is 96.9. And that's really, really not heading in the right direction, as you can imagine. We're not trending in a good direction when it comes to that. And we'll do further analysis and find out. Right now, that speaks to our patrol calls that we believe we need to answer, not all calls. Remember, all calls are right in that 166 number. This is our patrol calls. And why we have identified this to be the patrol response is, generally speaking, there'll be some safety aspect to this that would negate a CSO responding or would be too unsafe for cahoots to respond. And so our call takers do a really good job of trying to identify the right resource, the existing resources we have to send. And if there's any inkling that it might be unsafe for those alternative responses, then it becomes a patrol response call. And this is in this bucket where we get calls from people where people are scared or concerned about behavior. We've seen that out in West Eugene, Councilor Groves. You've seen those emails where it starts out being somewhat volatile and then it has a tendency to calm itself down. And the only reason it's calmed itself down is because we're delayed in our response and people leave or people walk away. And when that happens, those calls basically go unresponded to because we've moved on to something that's more a higher priority or is more active at the time. But in that 96.9 is where we're getting a lot of those emails that we all see about people being really unhappy with our lack of response. Next slide. This is the last metric that we do, which is our response time. And you can see from Q2 where we were on minutes in the queue in the blue, which are minutes holding, and then the average response time, 5.4. We're not going in the right direction now that we have 37 minutes in the queue and 5.8 minutes in response. And what I would say to council on this slide is keep in mind this is all calls for service. this is an average of all calls for service. So on the low side, what would be a low call for service would be, for instance, a priority one, crime in progress or person in harm's way that we're rolling to right now that we can get there in 30 seconds, 45 seconds, minute, 2 minutes, all the way to those calls that are sitting in the queue for 3 and 4 and 5 hours. And so as those all get averaged out, this is our average, which kind of skews those numbers a little bit, because what we hear about time and time again is the hours that people have to wait before they see us. And this slide would suggest that that's not the case, but just keep in mind, this is all calls for service. And so we have it on across the spectrum, seconds away from where we need to be, all the way for hours before somebody gets the response that they want. That is your CSI metrics. I know that that's a big part of what we wanted to discuss tonight. I know that there'll be some questions at the end of this, and I'm happy to answer those questions. But again, just thanks so much to the staff that put this together. They're on this call with us in case we want to get down in the weeds on some of the analytics. But again, just wanted to get those numbers to you as you start thinking about CSI investment and what we're trying to accomplish. It's really, really important that we have really good numbers to start with.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Twyla Miller. I'm the city's Finance Director, and I am here tonight to give you an update on the financials. So if we can go to the next slide. So as a reminder, the community safety payroll tax is assessed on employers with a physical business address in the city of Eugene. There's an employee component of the tax and an employer component of the tax. We implemented the payroll tax in January of 2021 with the first quarter return for employers and employees due on April 30th. Returns are due on or before the last day of the month for the previous calendar quarter as shown here. So January through March was due on April 30th. We just finished posting Q2 returns at the end of August, so we now have 6 months of experience, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then there's self-employed persons with net earnings from self-employment. Those folks file annually, so the first return for this group will be April 30th, 2022 for their 2021 tax period. Next slide, please, Laura. So what has our experience been? We currently have about 5,300 businesses registered in MuniRevs, our online portal. We expect additional registrations for self-employed persons as we come towards the end of the calendar year. And we'll be conducting outreach this fall to get accounts registered for those folks. For the first 2 quarters, we experienced a high rate of paper tax filing, about 40% versus the people using our online payment portal, which we will expect to decrease in future filings as taxpayers become familiar with utilizing the online filing system and as third-party administrators such as Paylocity and other providers align their bulk filing systems to file directly through MuniRev's system. We are in what I would call a stabilization period, given the lessons we've learned in the first 6 months. We are conducting a review of accounts to ensure that taxpayers are registered properly and have the correct tax forms assigned. And we're also closing some duplicate accounts in some cases. We are receiving some amended returns and requests for refunds and account closures, but those generally have very small dollar impacts, but we're working through those. We will be making system improvements based on our experience as program administrators and feedback from taxpayers to improve system functionality and reporting in the system. Our payroll tax team is working hard to respond promptly to taxpayer questions. We still do have questions from folks around subjectivity and their specific situations. So we're doing a lot of outreach there. And we will be incorporating taxpayer feedback into our public-facing tax explanations and instructions to simplify resources for employers as we look to the future. So the good news is we do have 2 quarters of tax revenue collected for the period of January through June of 2021. We collected $7.9 million in revenue for this time period, and I'll talk a little more about revenues on our next slide. So here I'll go over what we're anticipating with future payroll tax revenues. The red dotted line shows the $23.6 million level needed to support the system once fully implemented. The blue bars are the forecast that was developed when the payroll tax ordinance was developed back in 2019, and the gray bars are the current forecast. The largest drivers for the forecast model are actual payroll data that we receive from the Oregon Employment Department, or OED, annually, and economic information that's released quarterly from the state economist. As you can see from looking at the blue and the gray bars, the pandemic impacted the payroll tax revenue forecast more in the short term, and we anticipate revenues to return to the original forecast levels by FY24. Of course, the farther we go out in the forecast period, the larger the range of uncertainty as there is with any forecast we talk about. So staff are monitoring forecast drivers, and we update the forecast at least quarterly to align with current economic data from the state economist. OED does release actual payroll data annually, usually around the beginning of October. So staff will receive 2020 actuals within a couple of weeks, and we'll recalibrate the model at that time. We currently anticipate collecting about $17.7 million in payroll tax revenue in FY22 based on this modeling. And if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so now here I'd like to discuss our FY21 experience and how that impacts FY22. So if we think back to the spring of 2020, the city manager brought an amended budget to the budget committee that May as we recalibrated our original proposed budget due to the pandemic. At that time, we were right in the beginning of the pandemic. We weren't sure about the impacts, what they would be to the economy or our community. And for the Community Safety Initiative, as part of the amended budget, we took the following actions. We continued the plan to implement the payroll tax as originally planned with an implementation date of January 2021. We adjusted our revenue projections for the payroll tax for FY21. The original proposed budget projected $6.5 million, and we reduced that to $4.7 million for the first 6 months of the tax. We also reduced community safety service expenditures by almost $2.4 million from the proposed budget to align services with the bridge funding commitment, rather than increasing the service system as we originally proposed in the proposed budget for FY21. We supported this reduced service level by budgeting a one-time $2 million transfer from the general fund to the community safety fund. And also we budgeted a $4.7 million loan from the fleet fund with a loan to be repaid in FY22. So at that time, given the high level of uncertainty about our future, we felt this was a prudent financial approach to keep the new program going, albeit at a lower level than we originally intended, without overextending ourselves financially in a time of great uncertainty. Next slide, Laura. So as we always say, a budget is a plan, and we have some late breaking news on our actual experience in the Community Safety Fund for FY21. By the end of August, we processed the second quarter payroll tax returns, and we posted our revenue to finalize revenue collections for FY21. We are also in the later stages of our financial audit, where we have posted most expenditures to our FY21 ledgers, and we can now determine how much of the fleet loan we need to ensure a stable fund for the Community Safety Fund. We don't want to take out the whole loan if it's not needed for the stability of the fund. So if you look at the table on the top of the slide, in FY21, we had budgeted $4.7 million in payroll tax revenue, but we actually received $7.9 million, which is really excellent news. Preliminary audit numbers show that based on our actual experience in FY21, we only need $2 million in total to support the fund. Based on this new information that we've just received, we've made the decision to reverse the general fund transfer and have the $2 million returned to the reserve for the revenue shortfall. Given the financial condition of the general fund, this seems very prudent. The city manager and I will be giving you a financial condition update at your work session next Monday on the 20th. We will be also transferring $2 million from the fleet fund as the loan as part of the FY21 transactions to be repaid in FY22. So all in all, what does this mean for FY22? Overall, this is good news. We anticipate payroll tax revenues to come in at about $17.7 million. We won't need general fund support for the program. And the loan repayment will be $2 million, which will create some financial capacity for the program overall, around $2.7 million. As we finalize our audit, we'll be able to dial in final numbers. The FY21 amended budget was necessary given our circumstances and the uncertainty we faced in a really unusual and unprecedented time. But as Christy mentioned before, the impact to services was in essence the loss of a year of implementation and service delivery as we paused the program to maintain that bridge funding. So that That at a high level is our financials. And now I'm going to hand things back over to Christy to talk about next steps.
Thanks, Twyla. That was good news on a Friday afternoon last week, so appreciate it. So this is the final timeline slide, third one. I think it might be a record for a presentation. So tonight we covered a lot of major milestones and the work that started in 2018. The key thing I really want to point out in this slide is that time is moving quickly. And as we talked about the payroll ordinance, in June 2027, council will have to determine whether or not to refer the payroll tax for continuation or to let it expire. Those decisions will be based upon how well we're doing in achieving the outcomes that the community and the council have established as their goals. The ramp up for many of the services that we're implementing sometimes takes up to 18 months. You've heard the chief talk about, the time that it takes to bring an officer onto the street. For other services, it will require developing programs in partnership with providers and building system capacity to deliver alternative services. That's something that we spend a lot of time talking about, is really right-sizing the timing of the implementation to align with our partner capacity to do it. So we have those off-ramps and that we're matching the need in the terms of response. As mentioned, this is a multi-system approach and each is dependent on the other to provide services. Early implementation of strategies will be important to demonstrate the results needed to improve the safety, livability, quality of life for all people in the community. Next slide, please. Last slide, I should say. So this is the last slide, and there are 3 important dates. So as mentioned at the start of the presentation, we don't have any specific actions or requests for you today. We'll be returning with a work session on October 11th. And what we're asking for tonight is what we're seeking council direction to help inform and plan for that session. As mentioned earlier, the ordinance authorizing the payroll tax provides for 4 critical community safety service areas: police, fire and emergency medical services, municipal court and prosecution services, prevention, and homelessness. The ordinance provides flexibility for how funds are allocated across those service models. And so we will be coming back on October 11th is to talk a little bit more with you about that. And any information that you could provide tonight that would help you with that discussion would be very helpful for us. The next 2 sessions that are coming up that are related to CSI and the ARPA funds are the 2 budget committee meetings. You might recall that there was a motion passed and approved at the budget committee process asking for 2 sessions on those topics prior to supplemental budget. And then in December, you will then be approving on December 13th, you will approve the supplemental budget. And with that, we really appreciate your patience as we go through all of this information. We know it was a lot, but it hopefully provided you with a good review. And before I turn over to the mayor, city manager, did you have any other comments that we missed?
No, I think you did a great job. So I just look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. That was such a robust presentation and so interesting. And I really appreciate all of the metrics and the process in which you laid this out for us. It was incredibly informative. And we have plenty of hands up. So I have Greg and Matt first.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you guys hear me? My device is working, so that's a good thing. Chief, as I talked to you about 4 or 5 weeks ago, one of the reasons why I voted for the CSI was because I knew that we were under capacity. We did not have enough officers to respond to the calls that are out there. And subsequently, it makes the community far more unsafe than it is. If you call the police and you have your car stolen or somebody's breaking into your house, you want a quick response, and you can't always provide that. I had the opportunity to talk to some line officers about what their thoughts were and what was going on with them, and there was a consistent theme that came through. They're frustrated, they're tired, and they feel put upon by, the community as well as other folks that are expecting things out of them that they can't possibly respond to. I'm concerned about the mental health and as well as the physical well-being of our police officers, and the broken system that we have, that a police officer takes somebody off the street and then they turn around and have to kick them back out in the street, the offender, the accused person, without having the proper resources to deal with their issues. So this is for the city manager. I saw nothing in the AIS or the presentation about coordination with mental health services from Lane County. If we're going to beef up our police presence and a number of police officers that we have to respond, we need to have a mental health system that can respond to that, because most of the people that they're picking up should not be in jail. They should be in some kind of mental health treatment. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Chief, can you expand on that?
Christy might be able to do that, actually.
I'm happy to jump in. So I'm part of a regional team that's looking at the Mental Health Crisis Center and establishing a better response to those in mental health crisis. And so there's a lot of work that the Lane County, our partners at Lane County, as well as the other service partners that include hospital representatives and other providers, are working to address. There's funding that's come in. They're starting to roll out teams of people that we're actually hoping to work with quite a bit that will be able to support mental health response. That initial rollout will be great, but it won't be enough, and there's more work to do. So I'm happy to share that we are very involved in those conversations. There are representatives from the police department as well as the municipal court on that team of people that are evaluating options as we move forward, and be happy to get you more information about that work, because you're absolutely right, Councilor Evans. That's absolutely critical to the success of any type of system.
I have 2 seconds left. Chief, can you respond to the issue of officer frustration and the kind of issues that they're going through?
Certainly, Councilor Evans. I think you're spot on when you have a sense of the sentiment of our officers, and this is not a time for us to necessarily feel sorry for ourselves, but it is a time to recognize that we have imperfect human beings being asked to do a perfect job every single day. I'm so proud of this organization, especially my patrol division, who even through COVID didn't have the luxury of working from home, didn't have the luxury of staying distance from certain individuals. And they showed up every single day and put in the work. But you're right, they're tired. Fall brings another set of challenges when you're staffing football games, both at the high school and college level, and other types of things that people want and need us at. And we're at a place where we're oftentimes drafting officers, and usually our youngest officers and most inexperienced officers into those positions just to fulfill contracts, and we're just running them ragged. Right now I'm down 16 positions, not including the ones that are on deployment with military. And many of those individuals have stepped away at their first chance at retirement and or stepped away to become police officers in other states or left the profession in general. And I've got a whole different story to tell about recruitment right now. So, you're absolutely right. So one of the things that we're really paying attention to internally is trying to get our arms wrapped around what wellness means for these officers, what we can do to provide that support for them and their families, because that's a critical piece of our officers being healthy, is them knowing their families are healthy. And I have the right command staff that's paying attention to this, but I would be lying to you if I felt like I was doing an excellent job of it right now, as we all are stretched thin.
Thank you. Matt, and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start by thanking Chief Skinner and Sergeant Evans and Officer Henderson for the opportunity to go on a ride along on Saturday night and see firsthand not only the great work that officers like Officer Henderson, Officer Gent do, and nothing, Chief, but accolades and kudos for their professionalism and their approach to the work. Please express my gratitude. But the multitude of calls in that 4-hour window that go unanswered just because of the volume of work and the potential for officers endangering themselves if there's X amount of officers at Wash Jeff, for example, and another officer is solo or writing a report. Just seeing firsthand how stretched our law enforcement officers are was eye-opening, going well beyond the data. So I encourage colleagues to jump at the opportunity should it arise to do a ride along. And I look forward to many more, Chief. I look forward to riding along with Eugene Springfield Fire, and I look forward to riding along with Cahoots. In the description of the ordinance, in section 3, it says the purpose of the payroll tax is to raise additional revenue to be able to increase community safety services beyond what the city was able to fund in fiscal year 18. Could you expand, Chief, on, or Christy, on community safety services that are described in that ordinance? Does that limit us to additional officers? Can those officers be CSOs? Can investments be made in Cahoots when we revisit this in several months? What is the definition of being able to fund or increase, quote, community safety services beyond what the city was able to fund in fiscal year 18?
I'm going to jump in, Chief, and then you can jump in. So on section 3.728 of the ordinance, it identifies all the different categories of things and the things that can be, the dollars can be used for in reference to section 3 that you're talking about. So if your specific question is how can the dollars be used, they can be used over those categories of things that I talked about towards the end of the presentation with police, fire, and emergency medical response, prosecution and court services, homelessness and prevention. And prevention, you know, a lot of the work that we've been doing is more on the youth side, but it could include other things. So those are some of the key things. Does that answer your question, Counselor?
It's helpful. It's still somewhat vague if it just references homeless services.
Yeah, well, I mean, what it does is it provides a lot of flexibility in terms of the strategies to take on to achieve the outcomes that council has set. So that's the intention.
If I could shift gears just a second, because Councilor Evans brought up our county partners. I'm a little dismayed that one of our county commissioners has gone so far about 10 months ago or so, accusing the city of, quote, extortion by, quote, misapplying our tax authority. This question might be best served up for Twyla. What's the relationship right now with the county or other employers who might have folks who do some work outside of the city limits, but whose offices are within the city limits? Is there any resolution to what I've been reading over the last year, in particular with that one county commissioner I'm alluding to?
Yeah, so we work with a range of taxpayers across the community and work through the business location in and out of the city. and we apply the tax equitably to every taxpayer. To the situation you're referring to, from my perspective, we are in conversations with their financial staff, but not at the level. There's probably more communication with the county and city attorneys about this matter,
I'll jump in, Twyla. I think I think what you're speaking to specifically is the relationship around people that are not living in the city limits, but are working in the city limits and getting taxed, or they're working across the lines. And I think we're sorting that out issue by issue, trying to be as consistent and fair as possible. The second piece of that is really around collection of the payroll tax, and it's separate. It's not actually specific to the question you asked, but it is another overlap with the county that is something we're working through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Randy, and then Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank Christy, Kevin, the chief, and Twyla for the presentation. It certainly answered some of the questions I've had. One of the things I've been trying to figure out from the beginning, since I wasn't on council when the decision to impose this tax was made, I wanted to know specifically what was, how it was sold to the public. And I think this helped me a lot tonight. Question for the chief. Obviously, we've added some officers already, not the full load, but it seems like the disparity between resource capacity and demand for service is continuing to widen. I'm not sure how to address that. I mean, if we can't figure out how to rein this in. So part of it is your thoughts on that, but the other part of the question I'm trying to really get at is, what's driving the call increase? Is this across the board, or is there a particular area or areas that are driving the call load?
Councilor Groves, let me see if I can pick these off a couple at a time here. The first thing that I would say when we're talking about our call load is that as big of a number as that is, the 400 and plus calls for service on average a day that we go to, the one thing that I do know is that's a significant underreporting. We have a community that has been frustrated for a long time, and many individuals have just chosen not to call us. So as we fix this, as we shorten our response times and increase our capacity to serve people, you're going to re-incentivize people to start calling us more. And so I'm in preparation for doing something fantastic with the CSI. Also know that moving the needle is going to be difficult, because I think as people become more trusting of the system in response, they're going to come back to the table and start calling again. So that's the first piece that I would point out. You know, as far as moving the needle, we had the original 10 officers in the bridge funding, and I could have put those 10 officers on patrol and spread them across all of the shifts, which would have added a officer or so on a shift, which doesn't make a measurable difference. But street crimes, in my mind, was a great way to start really attacking some of the livability issues. And we've had some tremendous success with that team, and I've reported out on that. And you know, the qualitative part of that, which is so much fun, is when you watch somebody walk out on their front porch and start clapping because you finally took care of that problem house in their neighborhood. Those are feel-good stories that oftentimes don't go recognized. Moving the needle on this supply is a matter of adding resources, and I'm not going to say the specific resource that needs to be added, because we have a variety of needs out there, and not every single resource that we need to throw at that need is a police officer. So we're doing the analytics about where we have the need, and so we'll continue to work on what that means for the CSI. And this last year, we've seen our call volume steadily increase through the pandemic, largely with our livability crimes. Those things that are not on the face of it for me, and again, it's a little bit, you know, I've been doing this for 31 years. So things that feel unsafe to me probably would, you know, or things that feel unsafe to others don't feel unsafe to me. So I qualify that, but livability crimes are really where we need to focus our attention. If I could take a community crime reduction goal and say, I'm going to put the resources behind just handling our theft and larceny and shoplift and all of those cases, it'd make a measurable difference in our community, because that's what we're plagued with. We're not a violent city. We don't have violent crime that's happening to the extent that we need to throw task forces at gangs and gun violence and those types of things. What we need to do is have task forces around our car prowls and our car theft and our burglaries and our shoplifting and those types of things that are happening to these residents and small businesses. And so, you know, I think that's where we would approach this. And I think having a police response with a really good back-end investigative response, coupled with alternate or differential response, like Cahoots for some of those things, like the right CSOs for some of those things, I think starts to move the needle.
Thank you, Chief. I was out in my ward today, touching base with quite a few different people, and you know, I'm happy to say things are starting to get better in West Eugene. I mean, we still have a long ways to go, but we certainly appreciate your efforts and other efforts of other city employees that are working on these very frustrating issues, as you know, we've talked about before. So the quality of life issues, they are big to people, and it is something that we absolutely need to stay on top of. I also want to kind of jump on in support of something Councilor Evans said regarding, you know, the mental health of our officers. I worry about that as well. As I've expressed before, knowing from the fireside, when our people are thinking about things other than work or the effects of the work, they aren't focusing on the immediate threats that are in front of them. And it actually increases the danger for them and the public they serve. So I am concerned about what we're doing to help with that. I too have been on a ride along recently with Sergeant Matt Lowen, and I certainly appreciated that. It was interesting seeing things through his eyes and some of the calls we went to. But that is, I know there's frustration. Certainly it's not with you, Chief, but they feel kind of caught between two large rocks. We have different expectations in this community of what a police officer should and can be doing. So, you know, whatever we can do to provide clarity, you know, as a council and as leaders for our employees, I think is very important. And I'm running out of time. I'm going to need a second round, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Claire and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. Very thorough and grounding in terms of reviewing where we were in 2018 and where we were hoping to be now, and you know, all the challenges we faced in between. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness with which all of you are taking us through, as I think one of you said, this story. You know, whether it's how are we expending these things, how are we bringing them in terms of administration of the payroll tax, and then Chief Skinner and related departments in terms of how are we delivering services with them. So I just also had some questions. In the slide there for, I think, FY22, Christy, there was a Csi Project Manager. Can you describe a little bit more what the responsibilities of that position will be?
Yeah, happy to. So Kevin's been doing a really great effort since he came on board. And what we realize is that the size and scope of the Community Safety Initiative is huge, especially multi-departmental, working with our providers. So what we want is to add full-time capacity, somebody that's dedicated to manage and oversee the budget, to assist specifically around communications related to this effort, to help us with a lot of our outcome metrics that we're working on. we're really trying to do that. And so Kevin will work really closely with this new person that comes on board to help really have a lot of oversight and be with inside the organization to kind of keep hands on all the things that are going on. This person will also work with our steering committee of the internal team, our policy team, which several of us on this call reside on, and help us continue to implement strategies, be a conduit between the steering committee and the policy team to make sure that work is continuing to progress. And the person will also work with the advisory board that's been established and, you know, monitor the audit work and all those kinds of things. So a lot of different moving parts.
Great, thank you.
Kevin will still be here, by the way.
Yeah.
he's got a big role.
Okay. And then I just wanted to give a shout out to Twyla and her department, because several months ago, I think maybe in January, I was contacted by a constituent, a business owner who was having some issues with trying to implement the tax. And at first I thought he was unhappy about the tax. And then he clarified, no, that he actually supported it, but that how he was trying to deal with it was challenging. And I connected him with Twyla, and I don't know if it was Twyla or someone in her office, but she circled back with me later and said that she actually had a conversation with this constituent and that he gave really good feedback in terms of the process for tax collection, and that she was going to incorporate some changes based on that feedback. And so I really appreciated that. It really showed me the smart way in which Twyla and her team are working to make this tax work, even though it's a tax, people don't like it, but working to make sure it can be collected without being incredibly onerous for folks to comply with. I'd like to hear maybe from Christy about any of if there's ongoing funding that we've initiated for homelessness and youth services that's still connected with a CSI, whether it's through Bridge Fund or the funds we're bringing in now. And I'll need a second round too, Mayor. And one example was, I know the city leased a building just as the pandemic was hitting that was to serve as a service center, but that had to be temporarily, it's been repurposed to serve as Whitebird's medical clinic. But I'm wondering if you can point to any current programs we have going that were funded through this initiative.
Much of the work that happened had to do with some expansion of the programs that we had. So our rest stop program in general, car camping program, funding stability for our Dusk to Dawn program. So a lot of that was in that first round of investments that we did. And as you know, we're doing a lot of other investments related to homelessness that are outside the CSI. But as we look to find out what the best strategies are moving forward, we'll continue to evaluate where we go next with investing the dollars that we have allocated for homeless services. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, and I'd like a second round if there's time there.
Got it. All right, Mike and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to everyone for the presentation. That was exceptionally thorough. Contained quite a lot of information. I thankfully, Randy and Greg touched on a couple of the issues and questions that I wanted to bring up. So it kind of leaves me with one big one left. And Chief, it always seems that I pick on you when you come to talk with us. And I kind of feel like my questions are going to do that a little bit too. But one of the big things to me about this process of budgeting around CSI was that I've stated several times that I wanted you to have a clear opportunity to present the case for why we put the payroll tax in the first place and the nature of the problem. And I think you did a lot of that tonight. I don't know if you have other information you'd like to present to us at a future time, but I'd certainly be happy to hear that if you did. I know that you have experience working in other communities and their relative safety service capacity compared to ours. I know that your presentation was a couple of years ago now, initially, on the status of our public safety system. So there's obvious changes over time. So my question is, based on your presentation tonight and where we have been, what you've seen in other places. I want to know how you feel about our capacity to address this problem. I know that's a broad and an odd question, but I want to know, how do you feel about the job? Because it falls on you to answer the questions. How do you feel about where we are and the way things look going forward and the nature of the problem compared to previous time?
You're right. You do pick on me, by the way.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So one of the commitments I've always made to council is that I'm just super honest with you about what's going on. But with that honesty comes a sense of optimism and hope about being able to do something different. We're clearly underperforming for the second largest police department, municipal police department in the state. There's things that we should be doing that we're not doing. We have victims out there that we should be intervening on behalf, and we don't have the capacity to do that because largely we have to stay focused on the core of every police department's mission, which is to answer 911 calls for service. And it's got us running. There's no question about that. It's got us running. We need to fix that. We need to fix that so that we have the capacity to be victim-centered in many of the other things that we want to do. You've heard me talk time and time again, an agency our size with what's going on here in Lane County should have an Internet Crimes Against Children task force. There's children every single day that are victims of commercially sexually exploited children, are victims every single day in this community. There's pornography issues, there's production and distribution of child pornography that we need to be in. And you'll see those, you see those press releases that come out, and our special investigation unit does a fantastic job with what they have. But that's an example of something that I would love for us to be able to get to. The good news is that this organization, based on my experience in other organizations, whether it's Hillsborough in the Portland metro area or Tri-City region up in southeastern Washington, is that it's largely plagued by the livability crimes. And a sense of safety can be anchored to that. Now, don't forget, there's a difference between whether a community is safe statistically and the perception of safety. Both of those things are important to address.
Yeah.
The metrics around being safe and being able to throw a bunch of numbers at you telling you how safe a community is and whether or not our constituents feel safe in this community. Those are both things that we need to pay attention to. And that's largely centered around the victimization of those lower level livability crimes. Your car getting broken into, being shoplift, the types of behavior we see and some of the survival behavior we see of individuals that are trying to make ends meet and just trying to survive out on the streets. Those are the types of things that people feel unsafe when they see those things. So that's the type of thing we're trying to fix and the type of response we're trying to add to this. So the question then becomes, Councilor Clark, is whether or not we can respond to those things with a variety of resources, to include police officers where it's unsafe for others to respond, to include cahoots where if and when they have the capacity, and they're struggling just as bad as we are to hire people right now, but we need to create a way to have them have more capacity to be able to do that. And our CSOs, or that concept of our CSOs, is solid, but we might have to reinvent a little bit what that CSO does and what we send them to based on where we're at today and what our future needs are. So that's going to take some work to be able to do that. We need to bargain that. We need to build a new job description. We need to hire people into that to be able to do that. So we're underperforming. We know that. We take it very personal from top to bottom. We take it very personal that we're underperforming. Those of you that have done ride-alongs have seen that from our officers, where they wish they could do more. They're tired. They want to do more. But I do think more than any other community, this community, with this payroll tax and getting creative in how we're doing approaching community safety, is going to be able to do something no other community in this state's going to be able to do. And so I think that's the hopefulness part of that.
Well, you are a very hopeful man and very optimistic and a can-do oriented sort. And I appreciate all of those things very, very much. I seem to want to ask whether or not, what have you taken into account the conversations of this last year in ways about, obviously, I'm sure you have, ways that you might have spent all the money in the CSI 2 years ago and the way you might do so now. Can you talk at all about any of the things you've learned over time about how you might make adjustments, and then balance that with, what are the bare necessities to even get to some semblance of serving victims properly here with regard to the number of officers in that regard?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We know more now than we did 2 years ago. There's no question.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, over 2 years ago when I got here, that slide that showed that community engagement in 2018 and 2019, it felt like that's all I did every single night is out on the road show, talking to somebody and learning about where the needs were in our community. And while we were doing that, we were trying to build a product for council to look at in the community safety initiative. And I know that our portion of that was very accelerated as far as what we were trying to accomplish in the CSI and get in front of council. We've learned that we undershot on some expenses, maybe in some other expenses we overshot. I've learned things about the number of officers, and maybe more important, the supervision that we need to make sure that we have in there, because fielding a bunch of officers without having accountability and supervision and training makes no sense.
Right.
I know more today than I knew when we started about what a differential response might look like and how we need to build that more robustly than just trying to take our existing CSO program and just plug it in there and hope that it works.
Right.
There's some technology pieces we're working on right now that I think are going to also help our metrics around how we move away from the high levels of frustration where people are waiting for that phone call and never get it, and how we put the kind of the power in their hands to dictate when we respond and how we get face to face with them. So I'm really excited about some technology options that we can do. Our online reporting system, which is called Cop Logic, is just junk. It needs to be completely revamped. If any of you have ever tried to get online and report a crime using Cop Logic, it is the most frustrating experience a consumer is ever going to have. And if we're trying to create a unique brand experience for people we serve, then we're not doing a very good job. If that's we need to look at that. So you can hear it in my voice, you can see it in my animation. There's a bunch of stuff that I know today that I didn't know in 2018 when we started down this path, and I'm excited to kind of get started on this.
Well, that's the answer I was hoping to elicit here. So thank you, sir, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer, and then Alan.
Thank you. That was an excellent question, Mike. So Chief Skinner, you had an opportunity to talk to the police commission recently, and you touched on it a little tonight already about your challenges with hiring.
Mm-hmm.
So, as this CSI kicks in and you'll have, be able to, hopefully we'll have more employees, maybe not all officers, but other jobs too. And I know the challenges are across the board. It wasn't just with sworn officers. I'm wondering if you have a plan for that, and that if we're anticipating that trend is going to continue, are there ways you might be able to use the money to fix that? I don't know if there's like outreach we could spend it on instead if we aren't able to be hiring. Do you know what I'm trying to get at? I'm having a little...
I know exactly where you're
okay.
going. And what I would tell you is just affirm your belief that, across the entire industry of not only public safety, but across all of our industries, hiring has been difficult. Every one of my colleagues in Oregon Association Chiefs of Police, we have this conversation about how tough it is now. And so it's not just Eugene. As we know, Eugene is a unique place, but it also has some amazing things that draw candidates to it, and it's still tough. And so one of our focus points right now is we're working really, really hard on our general fund positions and filling those. You've heard me say over and over again, my priority is I want to fill our general fund positions because I think that's the order we should be doing this, and then our CSI positions, or a balance of the two concurrently. Right now we're running processes that overlap each other. We've got 6 processes scheduled, all overlapping each other for the next year. That's all we're going to be doing is outreach and recruitment, and then hiring. The hiring team has just been working so hard at getting the right people in the door so that we can start getting some of these individuals hired. We're right now with our general fund, we're certainly investing and more than we ever have before in promotion and outreach. We have incentives that we've got built in for our lateral officers to come to us from other agencies that are experienced. And one of the things that we have not acquiesced on at all is the importance of our background check and spending money to be able to do a healthy and robust background check, because it's not about just getting a beating heart in the uniform. It's the type of the heart we put in the uniform. And that's how we find out the type of heart we have is we fly our background investigators to where the candidates are, and we talk to people, we talk to them, look them in the face and see if they're a good fit for Eugene PD. So those are all those types of things that we're doing. And we just finished our first recruitment. The second one was launched overlap. We're in the application phase for that. I'm hopeful that we'll have as many as 6 or 7 coming out of background that'll come to me that will potentially have job offers and onto the psychological and medical portion of this. If we can get 6 or 7 at a time, which is ambitious, we're going to get back to where we were fully staffed. Remember, I was with you guys just so proud of how fully staffed we are for the first time maybe in the history of this department. And in a blink of an eye through the pandemic and through this last year, we're down 16. So it's really one of those things we're going to have to stay on top of.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that you have the resources you need for this process, even though it's challenging. So you don't need help in that. You're good. I guess that's what I'm trying to.
I feel good about where we are with our general fund, and I would expect, since we don't want to supplant that money, that when we start spending money on the CSI recruitment, regardless of who the employee is, whether it's a police officer, CSO, record specialist, whoever it is, that we need to be thinking about building the CSI budget that in there. So we have that money aside for that recruitment. So I need the CSI to support CSI bodies, and the general fund right now is supporting general fund bodies.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, Alan, and then Emily.
Thank you. Very good recap of where we've been and sort of where we're going. To me, the CSI driver was capacity, our ability to respond. And we were not responding in a whole bunch of different ways, not just calls for service at the police department, but on the human services side, on the court side, on parole side, all sorts of areas where we weren't responding. And that's what this was about. And it's still about that. So, but I too am concerned about the mental health of the officers and our ability to maintain officers. And at the police commission meeting, Chief, you talked to us about recruitments, and you just went through that. Was not a rosy picture. Being down 16 on just the general fund, we're not even talking about CSI yet. Our ability to get back to 16 is going to take us a while. I think it's getting tougher to do this job, and it's getting tougher to recruit for this job. I'm wondering what the impact all that's going to have on, we're not even getting to the CSI bodies or positions yet. That's going to take some time. I wonder if you could assess how that whole circumstance and the toughness of it's going to impact our ability to fulfill what we want to do in the CSI.
That's a great question, and it's one that the crystal ball is a little bit fuzzy on. I probably should use an 8-ball instead of a crystal ball on that one. What I've seen in my career, though, is this isn't the first time we've had challenges recruiting. This isn't the first time that we've really been struggling, and it's been kind of cyclic where it has a tendency to kind of come back around. I think what we'll see is, recruiting be a little bit tough right now. I think it'll be a little bit tough through the holidays, like it always is. But I'm hopeful, especially with some of the things that we're doing, which I've got an amazing recruiting team, and specifically Officer Kara Williams, who is doing personal phone calls and cold calls. We're like a sales center right now. Cold calls to candidates that didn't show up or maybe had a conflict. We're really doing some nice follow-up, and we're treating candidates almost like you would treat a 4 or 5 star recruit that comes to the University of Oregon and does like an official visit. We're really doing a nice job of grabbing people and being their first choice. Right now, in this first recruiting push that we've had, one of the things that's been a little bit frustrating is that, you know, you really don't know what type of candidate you have until you start digging into the background. Because a lot of people can look good on paper and come and interview really, really well. And then you get into the background and looked at it. And what's been really interesting is that we had a few in this process that had some problems telling the truth. And I'm not sure you got the memo, but being truthful is a bona fide occupational qualification of being a police officer. So that's a non-starter for us. And so we really have been frustrated with this candidate pool. Out of the 13 that went to background, that we're only going to end up with 6 or 7 because of some trustworthiness issues. But that's the type of work that we need to be doing to put the right people in this uniform doing this job. But I'll tell you, it's going to take a few cycles for me to really know whether this is here to stay or if we're going to be trending in the right direction. So I think maybe some conversation with council in the future on some of the trend analysis that we're seeing around recruitment before I push the panic button on this.
Yeah. How long does this cycle take?
So we open up a process to the first 100 applicants, shut it down and start doing that. Our process when I got here was close to 12 to 15. Well, it was close to 9 to 12 months was our process. We got it down to 90 days. So every 90 days we can do a full cycle. And that's all hands on deck. And that's because we want to be the first choice. And part of being the first choice is that we don't let any grass grow under our feet. We just go with it. And our candidates have told us time and time again how impressed they were with our engagement, how quickly we move through the process.
Right. So 100, getting 6 that might get offers. I probably shouldn't ask this question. What about poaching from other departments?
Yeah, I have no problem. There's no rules in this game. My first responsibility is to the city of Eugene and the Eugene community. And if I see somebody that we need, I have no shame in going and getting them. There's been more than few lunch dates with officers from other communities that I know are going to move us better. And, I'm trying to build a good bench. And I know there's lots of sports metaphors going on here, but that's what your exec team is full of a bunch of athletes. And so that's the only way they understand it. So, but yeah, I have no problem poaching.
Yeah, good. Now I'm still working on my metaphor bingo. You need car analogy, Chief. So I was going to ask a question about the capacity, but Mike asked that question. I liked your answer, Chief. I thought that was going. Could we just briefly bring up the last slide, which was the next step slide? In that process of next steps, I noticed we have a work session coming up and then 2 budget committee meetings. I know we're also going to be talking about the ARPA stuff. And I'm kind of wondering 2 questions. What do you need out of us for the work session on the 11th? And what are we going to do at the budget committee meetings? And what do you need from us today?
Is that directed at me or is
that?
Okay.
I'll jump in there. I think the idea was that when we came to the budget committee discussion and supplemental budget, that it would be a little bit like a traditional budget where I'm kind of proposing something, which is, absent all the conversations around CSI, would be what we would do every year. We would see the revenues, we'd come in with a proposal. So what we wanted to do today was just reground where we've been. There's been a lot of discussion about this. Here are kind of some of your questions and thoughts so that when we come around to the 11th, we can learn more so that we're prepared to make a proposal to you that's going to make sense. So what we really needed today was your questions and to kind of get a feel of the conversation. So you're pretty much nailing it.
Yeah, and my experience with the budget committee, I've been on 25 of them, 25 years of them, is that the more specific we can get, and the more nailed down we can get to the direction, to the conversation with the budget committee, the better that conversation is, and the more we can glean from it. So if we just have a conversation with the budget committee about what do you think, I think we need to do more than that. I think we need to, on the 11th, figure out what we want the budget committee to talk about and be prepared to talk about. And it's not there's some policies that we're going to make, and we're not seceding that to the budget committee. That's the purview of the council. And so we need to be clear about what we want to talk to the budget committee about, and what kind of input
Alan, you need to wrap it up.
Does it?
Okay, thank you. We're at time, but I want to give Emily her chance, and then Randy and Claire, you're just going to have to hold those questions for another time. Okay, Emily, take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report and all the work. That was an awful lot of work. It's really frustrating to have come into this saying that one of my first months talking to Chief Kearns, what do we need? We need more officers. And I began my campaign to get money for more officers, and was really, and I'm proud of the work we did to get there. And now we're farther behind. So really, really kind of unsettling. But I so appreciate your methods of dealing with this, and your relentless persistence and poaching. I approve of all of that. So it's distressing because we get so many emails about people who are distressed when they need help and they're not getting it. And what do I say to them? You know, fine. But my gratitude for the whole EPD's work and persistence, and keep the faith, baby. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all so much. This was an excellent conversation, great presentation. I feel as if all of you have sort of foreshadowed where we need to go in the next conversation. So that's very, very helpful. And with that, we are a little over time. I'll see you back here in less than half an hour. So having a good break. Thank you all very much. Thanks for that discussion.